Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to the episode 2 of the Supply Cap podcast. The recently rebranded, actually, last episode, if you're a returning viewer, you might have noticed, is called the Afterward podcast. And now, because there's so much RTS focused content coming out and about, we are now going to be calling ourselves the Supply Cap podcast. So, with me today is my lovely co-host, Derek Travisano, aka Theory. How you doing today, my friend?
Doing pretty good. It's the weekend. And I see you're somewhere different today. Where are you at?
Oh yeah, I am. You're right. I'm in my very cheap rundown room in Grand Prairie for work, but the content never stops. So I took my entire computer set up with me, brought the microphone, camera, everything, and we're filming this podcast after work on a random day. Because yeah, like I said, the content never stops. But the background's not going to be as nice as my regular setup back at the office. We'll make do.
Damn, that's dedicated. You brought the mic stand and everything. I
Everything. It was I don't want to say it was a pain in the ass, but like it sucked. It was a lot. And because I didn't really know how much time I'd have to do it, but I was like, you know what? I don't want something big to come out on Twitter or whatever and like not be able to record for 2 weeks. So it's the sacrifices that I make for our lovely fans back at home to make sure everyone's up to date. And I'm glad I did because there's actually been quite a lot of stuff in the RTS space that has happened over this weekend. And I feel like if we didn't record this on the Friday, we wouldn't be available to talk about it and be relevant. So jumping right into it, Stormgate, they've released their newest race, the Infernal Hosts.
where they have a video on it, right?
Yeah. So they basically just said that we have Infernal Hosts, and I think they've released like one unit on it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They showed a video at some I forget what event it was, but in the video they showed um I think it was called the Brute, or that's what they called it. They're like this brute, and
Yeah.
they'll win at any cost, and they showed it like splitting and
Yeah,
um
like blowing up and stuff like that, or like turning into different
yeah, and
units
like
and
two
stuff.
units ripped out of it. I forget what they called them, but that was pretty crazy. And then they
Yeah.
showed the worker close up, the imp.
Right. I wonder if that's going to be like a common theme across Infernal House when the game is live. Like if you like say get into the late game like tier 3, tier 4 tech and then you kill that unit and then it becomes a tier 3 unit and then it keeps like splitting all the way down the line like one of those Russian dolls that are like interwoven. I hope
Oh my
not because
gosh, that
that
would be
sounds strong, but
amazing. I've never seen that in a
yeah,
game, but that'd be a genius idea.
that would be. I hope they don't go too far with that, but that's pretty cool. So there's not a lot of information about them. We know that Infernal Host is coming into the game, which is awesome to see that they have the second race kind of getting fleshed out. Other than that, though, there's not a whole lot of information or gameplay about it. We know about one unit. We kind of know stylistic design about them, and I think they said their mantra as a whole race is kind of win at all costs or win at all and everything necessary. So I'd imagine they're going to be very similar to the brutes, where units are going to sacrifice themselves or die. They're going to explode. It's going to be just carnage of a race to play against. So that's pretty cool to see that coming in. Um, and then we also had the update on their music, their behind the scene or like the theme music, the BTS music, whatever you want to call that. Can you give us an update on kind of what that's looking like?
I was vibing out to this song off of what Pig had showed, and it seems pretty dope. I think they have some Command and Conquer artists on it. I
Yep.
should have written the guy's name down before today, but some reputable musicians in the space, as well as I think they're being advised. They said on Twitter by the chain
Chain
smokers.
smokers, I think. Yeah, that's sweet. I
So
like their
yeah, that's
music.
pretty
That's
cool.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, and I know just going through the Twitter thread after they announced this whole this ordeal, because I'm pretty sure they announced the Infernal Hosts and the producer for the music in the same tweet. People were very excited about the composer that's doing all the music for the Infernal Host. That's good. Like I'm in the same position as you. I'm not as familiar with their work, but it seemed that there was really warm reception to who they had doing that, and I'm all for it. I think that's great. And that's like one thing that I think gets overlooked in a lot of games is the small things. You know, the soundtracks, right? That people hear day in and day out. You don't realize whether it's good or bad until it's good or bad. So it's nice to have the update that they're bringing in someone that's very well known in the space and also getting kind of insulted by another group like the Chainsmokers for their soundtrack.
But yeah, I'm pretty excited. I was listening to it on Pig's content, and it sounded like a banger. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And games like StarCraft, like the Terran theme song is
Mm,
it's a
unbelievable.
classic, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody who's a gamer from that time period recognizes it.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So these RTS theme songs really have a big like impact on you, especially when you're playing hundreds of games, you're listening to it thousands of times. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Like I said, that's something you don't realize until afterwards when you can like hear the Terran theme song 12 years later and be like, I know where that's from. Like you don't know the name of the song, but you know like that is I can hear that, and that's the nostalgia sound when that comes out.
for sure. And I like how those RTS songs from like StarCraft and stuff, they always start out like kind of slow and easy.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
like the beginning of an RTS game where game starts out kind of slow. You're setting your hotkeys, your camera locations, but then it like ramps
yeah.
up and
Consistently,
yeah, it
yeah.
turns into a
Turns into
banger.
chaos.
Um,
Yeah,
and it seems like most RTS songs are like that. Like the Legacy of the
right.
Void Protoss theme was definitely like that. It like
Yep,
and the Wings of Liberty Terran theme, all those RTS games kind of have like this ramping up, and then there's like a climax in the song around the same time where you're
right.
starting to actually fight in the game, which I always thought was kind of cool.
And I think that's a really cool staple by Blizzard themselves too. They seem to go above and beyond for those type of things. The theme songs and the background music is always really big. I think they like actually bring in full composers and huge orchestras to do a lot of their stuff from scratch, as well as their cinematics. Those two together is a staple of Blizzard, and I think it's nice to see a group like Frost Giant kind of taking that with them because so far what we've seen, like their intro cinematics look great. The music they're taking very seriously. We don't know a whole lot about the game outside of the small snippets we've been given, but it's like those small quality of life pieces that really get you excited for the future because you know that if they're taking the music seriously, they're going to be taking the gameplay seriously, the balance seriously. Every other piece of it is going to be huge because I'm a pretty firm believer in the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And if they're taking the time to make sure every little small piece is good, then you're just setting yourself up for a victory. And I said there's not a whole lot of released information on the game, but we're incredibly excited to see what they're able to bring forward.
Well, yeah,
So
I can't wait for all these games coming out.
Oh, I know. And that's is why another thing too, we want to talk about the rebranding is because at first, so we've been following Frost Giant for I think like what, like a year and a half now, like since they
Yeah,
announced it. The day they announced it, we've been following them, excited for it. Me and Derek both are former StarCraft 2 pro gamers, right? And we've had a really long career and history in RTS scene. So it's been a very long drought for us. So when they first announced Stormgate, we're like, okay, we're going to be all in on this game. We are super excited for it before they even had any announcement of it. So when we had the idea for the podcast, we're like, yeah, we're going to be a Stormgate focused podcast because that's the next game coming out. We love the idea of it. And then out of nowhere, it seems that Zero Spaces came out of nowhere and they launched their campaign. They've launched a lot of footage for it. And then StarCraft seems to be coming back into resurgence as well. Before like they have the patch notes coming out with the major patch coming out for rebalancing. The Gamers 8 tournament that happened not too long ago, you know, kind of revitalizing the competitive scene. So it seems like in the past 2 weeks, even 3 weeks, the RTS scene has gone from kind of a time of the past to blown back up into the limelight, and more people are kind of getting inducted into this. So it's been something that is great for us because as an organization, for Aftermath, we're definitely all in on it. And Theory and myself, we're compassionate RTS fans as a whole. So this has been a really good month for you and I, especially. Like me, I think we're in calls and talking more now than we ever have. And you know, we talk all the time. Like you just came to Canada 2 weeks ago to visit, but now it's kind of just revitalized our excitement for what we have planned for the future and for this podcast. So I wanted to kind of reiterate that that was the main reason for the rebranding and yeah, the more content coming out for the podcast is going to be huge. So jumping right into it, because Stormgate is not the only group to have released a lot of new information recently. Play Zero Space, they've been pumping out the content. Like they're, I'm gonna check this right now. I should have done this beforehand. Their Kickstarter went
yeah.
absolutely berserk. Like I don't know. Let me pull this up. They went crazy, man. They've been crushing goals like left, right, and center. Because even last time you and I talked about it, Their initial goal was $100,000 US, and right now they're at 474,000 Canadian. What's that?
So that's 349K USD,
Wow.
which is insane.
Yeah.
Especially since
Yeah.
it's only been 7 days since they threw up this
A week.
Kickstarter,
Yeah.
and
And they crushed that initial
they
goal.
crushed
They had
it.
1 month to do it. Yeah, and they did it in like 4 hours. Yeah. So that's a game that, I mean, they're kind of changed. They're taking a bit of a different route than Stormgate. I feel like they've kind of came out of the gate swinging with how much content they've been pushing out from their game. I feel like there's a bit more um, gameplay footage than what Stormgate has done, which is I like both sides of it, right? Like I'm a very big fan of teasing things, being like, "Okay, here's a little snippet here, here's a little snippet there," to keep you engaged. You don't want to give away too much of the pie because you want them to be excited the day they play, right? Like I don't want to jump into the alpha or beta of Stormgate whenever I have the chance to play it and kind of know the ins and outs of what I'm getting into. At the same time, too, it's nice to watch all the stuff coming out of ZeroSpace and be like, "Oh, damn, I really like where this is going." So, first impressions of the gameplay footage, how's that looking for you?
I was actually extremely surprised how far along Zero Space is, because
Oh,
the day it was announced, a lot of content creators put out stuff on YouTube, and we were filming our podcast during this like same time. So afterwards, I watched some gameplay videos. I watched BCQT's full video of him explaining. What is the Terran faction called again?
I actually, I don't want to get them mixed up. What is the one in Stormgate called right now?
Um
Remember what?
I have no idea.
Okay, so I don't want to get them mixed up because I'm probably going to. I know the one race is called the Grell, and the other one I want to call the Human Resistance. Is that Stormgate or is it called the Human Resistance?
Let me look it up on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, let's check this out because now we're
The
getting to
Protectorate.
the Protectorate.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
I
so
knew it
Human
was a P word,
Resistance
but I was
is
like, I would have never
yeah, the
remembered
Protectorate.
that. The Protectorate.
The Protectorate, yeah.
Um,
So the Protectorate is kind of like their human slash Terran race, and the Grell is more or less like there's Zerg. I kind of feel bad tying it back to StarCraft. It's hard not to because that's kind of our base level game. Because when you watch the gameplay itself, they're very distinct in their own feels. So yeah, just what's your first impression of the gameplay released for Zero Space?
so watching BCQT's basically explaining the Protectorate, he also showed a 1v1 he played versus Cats, I believe. It
Mm,
was very fluid and far along from what I could tell.
very.
Uh,
Yep.
all the units they showed seemed to have high resolution models, which kind of had like a Borderlands look to it, like a Borderlandsy
It does.
art style, which
Yeah, it's
I
like
really liked actually.
it seems like an Unreal Engine Borderlands kind of like yeah, because like the almost on the brink of cartoony, but not really. Like it's still
Yeah,
a high definition. Very yeah, it's cool. I like it though. And the thing I like about that very thing is it's very easy to distinguish units between
yeah,
themselves.
and
Right?
abilities and
Like it's
everything. It
yep.
it had a very good visual look to it. Also, they
Yeah.
showed the turn. There was no turn rates from what they showed and what BCQ was explaining. The units are kind of like League of Legends. They just instantly will turn around and
Right.
making them
It's very fluid.
extremely microable.
Yeah.
And they showed a lot of
Which
cool
is exciting.
micro tricks, and you have to like dodge
Yep.
explosive AOE visuals that are very
Yep.
clear to see. They had this cool like I think it was the Commandos, which had the jetpack ability that you
Right.
press it and they like jetpack backwards a little bit. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, it was pretty cool to watch that gameplay.
It was, which is wild for us too, because so when they first announced that, you and I went through that entire Kickstart, and we like pulled that thing apart with a fine tooth comb to see like what that is going to look like. And there is one section in there that kind of said that they might be trying to pull back about from the APM, right? So that was their first. I think they worded it like trying to reduce the APM strain or something like that. And at first, I was worried. I'm like, okay, if they're pulling back APM, which stands for actions per minute, is that going to pull away from how much micro you have to do, right? And after watching that gameplay footage, I'm like, oh no, there's still I think all the battles are very micro
Yeah.
intensive, which really kind of increases the skill ceiling, right? So that for myself was a huge sigh of relief. That I'm like, okay, after watching that gameplay footage, I got really excited because you're right, it's incredibly fleshed out. The units move very smoothly. It seems like a very cohesive game to play. Very interesting with how it works through the entirety of the game from start to finish. And I'm also really happy to see that the heroes coming into the game, it's not like Warcraft 3 where you like farm them out and get creeps and you have to worry about your hero level and stuff. The heroes themselves are going to be just like a singular powerful unit, but it's not focused around your hero. It's just an additive sort of piece of the strategy, which is great across the board because I really enjoy just the straight up StarCraft style RTS of micro, macro, and the better opponent kind of wins rather than he picked Blade Master, he went farm creeps better, got a lucky drop and won because his hero's just further along.
Yeah, I thought the way they were going about heroes in this game was actually pretty cool. I think
Very.
you noticed that the heroes aren't leveling up. You're getting experience towards just like your overall hero abilities or something. Um
Yeah, so that was one big thing I noticed. Yeah.
they have
So
the spell bar just like StarCraft 2 co-op at the top with like four abilities, control, QWER.
yeah.
Seemed very similar to StarCraft co-op in that regard. But mixed into the competitive game, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool aspect to go down because like you said, it's kind of a extra powerful unit to utilize. And at first I thought there was going to be experience towards yeah, like your singular hero, and you kind of get focused around your hero more so than the rest of the RTS game. But from what I've seen during that gameplay footage they released, is as you level up, so you like kind of you have to fight on the map for different contested areas, right? You like control a tower, have to control it long enough, get the contestant, and then you gain experience points, right? So it's really making the game interactive on the map. So it's going to be a really good balance of being on the map, attacking, pulling back, getting map control, harassing, all this type of stuff to obtain these towers to level up. And as you level up, you get to research more into your actual like factions. I don't know what they're calling it. It's kind of like almost a tech tree, right? So at level one, you might get a small bonus, and you kind of have different choices all the way down to the very bottom. Where like once you get like say level 10 or whatever the maximum is, you get like a very powerful ability to use. So I know with the Grell, they have a thing called the Tree of Life, where basically when you join or you get into a fight, you can drop it wherever you'd like. It has a little area of effect wherever it gets dropped on it, and units standing in that area will get healed and instantly resurrected.
That's
Right, so
crazy.
that's
I saw
so
that in the
cool.
clip. It looked so strong.
Yeah, and then the Protectorate, they have like an airstrike. So when you get into a fight, they can airstrike across and carpet bomb an area, right?
Yeah.
So,
And are
and
those
the thing I
the
like,
races ultimates or that comes from the hero
mm,
or faction, right? I think that's one
it's
of the
I think it's a
subgroups.
race. So I think so. I don't know where that comes from because there is a lot of in depthness as far
Yeah.
as because there's the four factions and then six like mercenary rate classes and then like 16 champions. But I think that comes from the race of
Okay.
like the race itself. So it's going to be four different tech trees, and that might change up depending on the mercenaries you choose. And like there's quite a few things that go down the actual line as far as customization about that. And that's not really fully known yet because they didn't touch on that in depth
For
as they
sure.
played it. But I think it adds a really cool aspect to the game where map control is super important. Where even if you start to fall behind, you can't just turtle up and try and build some death ball and then all in and win, right? Because if you just turtle up and not try to approach your opponent on the battlefield, you're going to get too far behind because they're going to level up and be like level 10 tier like 5, and then you're never going to win that. So I think it's going to be a really cool like power dynamic throughout the entire game. It's going to change up strategies a lot, and I'm really excited to see how that works because even in StarCraft 2 there wasn't any objectives on the map, rather over just having map control enough to not like get attacked
Run
out of
out of
nowhere, right? Like you
resources and get caught off guard, right? Like
that said, you want to be active enough on the map and have enough map control where they can't like drop your main and attack your third, but you can't, that's pretty much it. And that's just like strategy about being able to read that coming, right? I think with this game, it's going to have a totally different aspect where it's like you drop the main, you attack their fourth base, you try to take this tower over here for like the experience rate. And it's like this whole battle across the map where it seems to never slow down or end, which is going to be really awesome to see at a really high level because we already know. once the pro players pick this game up, they're going to find all the best ways to do that. It's going to be it's going to be really cool to see. I think it's going to be a great spectator game, a great competitive game across the board. And I think the things we've seen coming out of it is really, like you said, really blown out our expectations as far as what this game was going to be from our first reading through launch.
Definitely. And yeah, I think you're right that those are the ultimates of the one race. It's interesting to see the combinations that are going to happen between races, factions, heroes, because you get to pick like a combination of the three.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we, in the last episode, I mentioned I think a draft system would be another cool implementation to also to help with balance, but also to add some variety to what people have to learn how to play and how matches play out. And even B Security mentioned that in his content. So it seems like that is in the discussion. So I think we'll probably see something like that, and it'll make a really cool meta for this game.
I see. So when you say draft, do you mean something more or less in the long? Because they already have the ban system, right? So do you kind of mean in a like a system where you start the game, each player gets to make their bans, and then they get to choose certain things. So by the time the game starts, you know what your opponent's fully
I
chosen.
think so. And also, I
Okay.
mean, by draft banning, like you said, but I don't know if they have a ban
Right.
system. I think that's just what we've all been like the content creators have been talking about us. I think that's just something that
Oh, is
we're
that not
expecting.
confirmed anywhere?
I didn't see it
I,
anywhere.
I thought
QD mentioned
I
it.
thought for sure I seen something about. I thought I seen somewhere about. I'll go through it because I thought I read something about a ban system where you can go through. There's a ban phase at the beginning of each game. But now that you say it, I don't want to confuse myself because I that would be pretty important. If you could do a ban phase, that would be
Yeah. I don't think it's been announced yet, but
significant.
I think it would be very fitting in under maybe like some tournament formats. But we'll see.
Yeah, I
It could be we don't know much about the game yet. It could go many different ways, but
yeah
it's the first time we're going to see such combination in an RTS game. Like in Warcraft 3, you can
right.
select one of 4 heroes at the start of the game with each race, which adds some variability, but over time the meta evolved and it's like okay, like there's like only 1 or 2 good choices in each matchup. So,
Right.
it wasn't
And I think
that crazy. And imagine it gets banned out.
no,
That
you're
would make
right.
it very interesting.
That'd be insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you went down, like imagine back in the day if you could somehow ban a unit, right? Like say StarCraft 2, if we
Ban Blade
played
Master.
PvZ. Oh yeah, yeah, you played ban Blade Master. Or like imagine you're like, oh, I just don't want to play against Broodlord Infestor. Okay, well I'll just ban out Infestor because then Broodlords suck. Right? So then that changes up the dynamic of the game entirely. Same with champions. If there's overpowered champions or anything of the sort, like cool, I'm gonna ban out the absolute best pick in the situation to kind of force you down a different route. So I
Definitely.
think there's like a lot of cool things, especially if they have the ban system. I'm trying to go through the Kickstarter to find where I seen the ban system, but
Yeah, it's not mentioned.
yeah,
I don't think.
I'm trying to go through the videos real quick to see
I think we just
if they have that.
talked about it in our last episode.
Maybe we just completely got ahead of ourselves. Excited.
Yeah, I was proposing one because in Dota, like the game is incredibly imbalanced without a draft phase.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's always a broken hero in the meta, a broken strategy, but each team gets 7 bans in captain's mode. So you can
Oh wow.
ban
Okay.
7 heroes. You could ban the OP ones, the ones that are broken against your strat, the ones that are broken in synergy with what they picked so far, etc. And if there is like an OP combination against your faction, which your faction can never beat, like Protoss were never able to beat Swarmhost and Heart of the Swarm.
Yeah.
You could be 900 times better than your opponent, but you weren't going to beat Swarmhost if they had
Played
fingers.
that properly. Yeah. That thing. Yeah. And a
So,
pulse.
in a case like that, it's like, oh, my race can't beat this race. Well, I ban one of their units, they ban one of mine, and now we're on an equal playing field.
Yep.
So I think that's how they could balance such variability with how many combinations are going to be in this game.
I think that makes sense too because that also takes off the pressure on the developers constantly try having proper balance fixes because we talked about that the first time too in our last episode is that with this much customization potential, it's going to be a balancing nightmare across the board, right? Because we even see that in Warcraft 3 back in the day, right? There is, what was it, I think Night Elves or one of the races just didn't get played competitively because they weren't competitive at all, and trying to balance them back in the game either made them too broken
You're
or
thinking of
not
the
strong
undead.
enough. And
Yeah.
was it
Yeah,
undead?
Night
Yeah,
Elf were always
undead was
pretty
just
pretty good.
pretty good.
But
Okay,
undead were
yeah,
unplayable and then became the best faction by like 100 times.
right. It's hard to get that proper. It's like, okay, they're unplayed. Let's try and crank them up a little bit and see how that works. And then people start playing it, and then they develop the meta. And then maybe they weren't that terrible before, but because they were just kind of bad, people didn't play them. And then they finally get played, and then people are like, oh shit, we can do this and this and this. And then they just like they scale infinitely, and you just lose, right? So I'm really hoping that they do implement a ban phase. I'm on the Discord right now asking if that is a thing because I thought for sure we did see something, but if they do add that in, that would be
That'd be
huge.
cool.
That would fix all the problems. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, some other things I noticed from the video that I thought were cool. So I guess overall in the last podcast I mentioned like, oh, maybe Stormgate will be more competitive and this one will be more casual. But watching the gameplay, this one looks competitive also. It looks
It
like
does.
both
Yeah.
can have a competitive 1v1 focus.
Absolutely.
The way it
Yeah.
played out, the 1v1 was very cool. And like you mentioned, there's objectives on the map in ZeroSpace to fight over. I love RTSs which have the skirmishy feel. No
Right.
one wants to go back and watch StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm. And no one,
Yeah.
sorry, Age of Empires, but no one really wants to watch Age of Empires. Um,
No, you're right. Yeah.
the,
It's like a 25-minute farm fest. And then,
these turtley RTSs are just like a snooze and
yeah.
they're not fun. Um,
No, they're not. You're right.
they're really painful. Like it's fun to play like campaign casually, but from a competitive perspective, it's like brutal. It's like beating against a brick wall. It's just rough. But in a
It
game with
is.
like
Yeah.
more skirmishes, there's less turtle focus. It's not just someone builds a bunch of defenses and death balls. It
Yeah.
more fun to watch, more fun to play, just a better game overall.
Yeah.
Because when I look back at like Heart of the Swarm StarCraft versus Legacy of the Void, Heart of the Swarm, everyone just got a fast expand, defended it really hard. Protoss would do like some turtle into 8-gate blink all in sometimes. Zerg would just go swarm host. It
Yeah.
was a painful game. And there was
It
no
was.
objectives. It was just build up an army that kills them.
Yeah.
Legacy of the Void, the way they fixed that was they added basically, well, they didn't add, they took away all the resources from every base. So it's like
Right. Yeah.
bases
They
have
made
no
it
money
super.
now.
Yeah.
So you have to fight over bases. Like that was how
Yeah.
they made the game skirmishy because it's like, okay, you have to like take every
Right.
resource you can on the map, else you will run out of money.
Which is kind of a cool way to fix it. I
Yeah,
do like that instead of like removing units or trying to change how the game is balanced. Like, okay, well, you know what? Here's your base. It's going to run out in 3 minutes, so you have to fast expand, then take a third, then a fourth, and then you have to like actually be active on the map because if your opponent gets a sixth base, you're not going to win. I kind of like that. Like you said, it's skirmishy. It forces people into conflict, and it just creates a different power struggle rather than just trying to build up a death ball and a move and hope to God you win. And I
exactly.
think across both games, right? Because it's cool now that we have Stormgate and ZeroSpace to talk about because I think they're both RTS games, and RTS have a very fluid feel to them as far as like the way the gameplay kind of plays. But then they also have so much differences between the two that it's going to change the way each one is played. And like I said, we don't know nearly enough about either one to have those comparisons yet. But I'm excited to see what that looks like as far as the development of the games because when we played StarCraft 2 was the only RTS, right? So StarCraft got to do whatever the hell they wanted to do, which I think was kind of the downfall of the series overall. But now that Stormgate and ZeroSpace are coming out together, like when one company implements something, another company can kind of be like, oh shit, that's cool. Let's try to play off that or implement our own. I
Yeah,
think it's going to be a back and forth of like constantly trying to improve their game, make it more playable, more fun, try and retain their player base, right? And it's gonna really just force the companies into just focusing on quality and stuff that player base wants to do. I think it's gonna make them listen to their player base more as well, which is just across the board
yeah,
exciting
that's super
as a
exciting.
player. Yeah, it's a cool place we've never actually been in because we've never
Had competition,
been in a
right?
multi.
Like
Yeah, ever. It's been StarCraft and that was it.
yeah, in the battle royale space, there's a bunch of games competing. FPS, ton of games
Yep.
competing. MOBA, you have League and Dota.
Yep.
And it's a good point you made about them like kind of learning from each other, because of course League got a lot from Dota, and then now
Yep.
Dota is getting a lot from League. In the most,
Yep.
there was a huge patch earlier this year in Dota. It was massive, and they took a lot of stuff out of League of Legends. Like there's now like vision words that you can capture for a certain period of time and deny. They basically took crab from League of Legends, and then they
Sweet.
added different objectives with kind of like buffs around the map, kind of copying a little bit of the ideas that League have, with more
Yeah.
symmetry on the map, more objectives, more vision, like different mechanics on the map itself.
Which I think that's fine though, because I mean, if it works, it works. You
Oh
don't
yeah,
always
I
have
think
to
it's a good
reinvent.
idea.
You know,
Like these
you
games
don't
are
have
all
to
good
always
games.
reinvent the wheel. Exactly. Yeah. So if you just take the stuff that works, be like, oh, we can implement that. That's
Yeah,
great.
and it's because
then,
of the competition. Like this game's
yeah,
good, this game's
exactly.
good. They're gonna learn from each other.
Yep. Yeah. Because end of the day, like if one game's significantly better than the other, and they're not listening to their player base, they're just going to go to the other game. So they have to be on top of things. And another thing I'm excited for, because when StarCraft 2 came out, it was like the leading esport. Like before that, it was what? It was like Call of Duty a little bit, and then there was like Counter Strike over in Europe, and then like the original StarCraft in Korea, but there wasn't a big esports scene. I think
Yeah,
or StarCraft really pushed that into the limelight, and it helped create the foundations for like League of Legends and these teams to kind of, or these games to come to fruition. And now we're in a position where esports is very heavily matured over the past like 12 years, 13 years since StarCraft 2 released. And I'm excited to see even more than that. It's been like, what, 14 years? 13 years. Yeah, 13 years since
yeah.
StarCraft 2
Since the beta.
released, right? Yeah. And I mean, going into the landscape we have now for esports and content creation and all this stuff, I think it's going to be awesome to have an RTS back in the limelight as a tier one esport for just so many different reasons. Like individuality is massive. We've only had team games as of late, right? It's harder to create your own legacy in a game like say Valorant if you don't have the opportunity to play with four like-minded individuals that are on your level and support and kind of grind that out. So the the esports side of things is going to be very interesting to see what the dynamic looks like now because there's a lot of teams that have joined the esports space, like say 100 Thieves and Energy. Well, Energy started StarCraft too, right? But you see all these different teams that have come out of, well, not out of nowhere, obviously, but they haven't been a part of the RTS space. So I wonder if they're going to pick up the game early or regret not being a part of it because they don't understand the landscape is going into or how this is going to play out. But I'm excited to see what that looks like over the next, what, 6 months? More than that. Over the next year and a half, I guess, because Zero Space doesn't officially launch until May of 2025.
Damn.
But yeah, long ways away from an official launch. But we also know that betas can go on for a long time. And I think the StarCraft beta was like a soft launch, anyways, right? They had tournaments going
Yeah, it
on.
was
It was an open
practically the
beta.
full game.
That's it. Yeah.
And yeah, even in StarCraft beta, the game was huge, getting
Yep.
lots of coverage. You had breakout players like TLO during the beta,
Yep.
a bunch of root players. It was a really cool time to watch the game get learned and learn like who's going to be the best when the game comes out. And
Yeah.
it was pretty clear in the beta like who the best players were going to be.
Right.
It was out for a long time. It was out for like, I want to say more than half a year. And then there was like a 3 month nothing, and then the actual game came out or something. I forget exactly how it was, but it was most of my senior year of high school, I think, where it was like beta, downtime, then game release.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was a cool time to be in the game as well because, like you said, it was very abstract and new. And you got to see all these new strategies develop from zero to whatever the game went to. Like by the end of Wings of Liberty, the game was so different than when the beta came out,
Yeah.
and they didn't change that much. Like, I mean, the units didn't change, the balance change, and all that type of stuff, right? But I mean, the game itself didn't change the fundamentals of it, and the game looked like flip side different compared to what it was at launch. Like, I remember during that beta tournament when Idra used to do the 12 worker, the drone pull all in, and that was like a big strategy back then, right? Because that was like how new the game was, and that just worked, right? Compared to the way a game looked at the end of it, and it was just way more base taking, map control, micro, macro. The whole
Yeah.
game was just different. And I think you don't get that sort of development in other games because you're limited by the constructs of the game. There's not as much freedom to be creative with what you're doing or try to find workarounds for things that are happening.
Yeah, StarCraft, there was
So,
so much to learn at the start. We've learned so much since the
mhm.
beginning. Um, the original maps, Wings Over, were also, I don't know if you remember, they were horrible. They were some
They
of the
were,
worst designed maps ever. And
yeah.
I remember Shattered Temple was in the pool. Oh my god.
Oh,
Can I
that
go on a
map, yeah,
can I
that
go
thing
on a
was
rant
terrible.
about Lost Temple?
Lost Temple, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So Lost Temple, everyone's heard of it. It's been in every RTS game ever. And it is a horrible map. Like, it is actually horrible. It has
Yep.
lots of gimmicks. It's limited on resources in almost every game it's in. They always had that high ground or something you could put siege tanks on, and it's just a
Yep.
dumb map. And I remember people would want to
Always.
1v1 on it that like weren't competitive. Like, oh, you're like, I heard you're semi-pro, let's play. And they host Lost Temple. I'm like, oh my god, rolling my eyes. Like, this is
Yeah.
such an awful map. And they're like, oh, it's a good map. No, it's been plaguing RTS for years.
Forever. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I hope they don't I hope they don't bring
Yeah.
that back in.
Everyone's gonna block our podcast after hearing my Lost Temple
Like, yo, what
rant.
do you mean, man? I miss Lost Temple.
Oh my god,
I want to
please
play that.
no. Like Big Game Hunters,
Yeah.
that's a fun classic. Like that'll never get old.
Yeah.
8-player free
Legit,
for
yeah.
all, 16-player free for all, whatever. But
Yeah.
Lost Temple, that one can be forgotten in history. I wouldn't care.
Yeah, I know Lost Temple was a pretty bad map because I know this game came out with Wings of Liberty and that was on there forever. That was a terrible map. Do you remember what was even worse than that was Close Spawns on Metropolis when that was a popular
Yeah,
map?
when back when
Or
it was horrible.
or even when it was like back to back, you just like rushed air and just harassed your opponent right across a little airspace.
Yeah.
That was a terrible
That
map.
that
That
was
was
kind
just
of fun, the airspace positioning, but you're right, the close spawn, especially as a Protoss player, you just can't play the game.
yeah. You can't. No, that was terrible.
I don't know how I won games on that map. Looking back on it, I don't know how Protoss won on any map in Wings of Liberty.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think
Like if we were to go back and
well,
play
Wings of
now,
Liberty.
Protoss would just be horrible because the maps are just so unfitting for them.
Yeah.
And Ravens were OP.
You know what I do
And
really miss
Thusters.
though about Wings of Liberty was a really good Archon toilet when that first
That
became
was
a thing.
fun. That was exciting.
That was the most satisfying. Yeah, that was the most satisfying thing on the planet when you get like 5 Archons, 6 Archons in a mothership vortex and just destroy.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I did that, I was like platinum and I was just I think I was like banking like 10,000 resources, finally hit that thing and won the game. And I was like, yeah, I'm on my way to the pro league, baby.
That's hilarious.
That was the coolest part of playing that game. And I hope they have cool shit like that where it's like I hope they have really satisfying, hard to pull off mechanics in Stormgate and ZeroSpace because those are fun. It's like a really high risk, really high reward sort of play. I think those are really cool to have because pro players are probably not going to touch it in pro play, but if they do, people are going to lose their minds, and that's going to hit every single top of the whatever clip of the week sort of show imaginable. I love that type of shit.
Yeah, I miss strategies like that. You know, they took it out of StarCraft. They took out
Completely.
Vortex.
Yeah.
I think even in Heart of the Swarm. It was pretty sad to see it go. It was a little crazy.
Yeah.
But I feel like they could have just like nerfed it a bit. don't,
I feel like it was crazy because I hated in Heart of the Swarm as like the game was decided on whether or not you hit the vortexes. Like if you hit a vortex, you win. If you miss it, you lose.
Yeah. And
that was
in
pretty
that,
much it.
I think to spin it around in another way of wording it, it depends on if the Zerg had fingers and split their units.
Right.
Uh,
Which I mean, they're Zerg. They didn't have that, so
yeah, they were playing with like
A clicks.
yeah, I don't know. They were playing with their feet and still winning. I don't know how people lost with the Fester Breedler.
Yeah, me neither. It wasn't possible. We're also very salty Protoss players, so we're not going to go down that tangent role of Patch Zergs or Infested Broodlord or anything like that because I mean we're in a different headspace now, right? We're matured.
Yeah,
We're grown adults. You know, we're not.
they nerfed it out of the game,
Not
so
salty.
I think
Thank God.
I think
That makes
our-
me happy. Yeah.
our positioning on that matter was confirmed.
Yeah, I feel like I can sleep better now that you said that. That makes me happy. That's good to hear. I hope they don't let things go too long in RTS games. So the thing is that makes it hard to balance an RTS game no matter what is they don't want to do things too quickly because, as we've seen, there's always strategies eventually that pop up to deal with things, and you kind of want to leave that creativity in there. But it's also so heartbreaking when you're like playing in a meta for 6 months straight where you're just like feel so doomed. You're like, I'm not getting into late game. I'm just gonna two base all in because I don't want to play against a strategy, right? Um, so that does suck when you come against that. But I do hope that with both these games coming out, that they can kind of try and tweak things a bit sooner to try and ease how long specific metas stay in the game, especially if they're too broken, right?
Yeah.
If it's like something that is game changingly broken, I hope they can kind of bounce it out quickly. We'll see how that goes moving forward, but I think balance is going to be an important part of what they do moving forward with both these games. And like I said too, I think that'll help having more than one title out, because if you and I played StarCraft 2 during the Infested Broodlord era, I would probably just quit and go play a different RTS at that time.
For sure. And
100%.
I hope they balance these upcoming RTSs more often and frequently. What we saw in StarCraft 2 in like Heart of the Swarm. So in Wings of Liberty, I liked the pace that they patched things because people figured stuff out. But like RTS players have gotten so good at RTS games. So like by the time Heart of the Swarm was out, they were like, oh, let's wait for people to figure out how to stop swarm hosts. It's like, get in the unit tester and you'll realize no unit kills them. Like there's no way to stop this unit. And they waited like a year. And I mean, half the players quit. Like pretty much every Protoss pro quit.
Or switch races or something crazy.
I don't know if it's because of the swarm host, but I imagine it had something to do with balance. But like you didn't see, I know a lot of these guys, so I don't want to say their names, but a lot of Protoss pros were not in Legacy of the Void, and I guarantee it was because of that unit.
Yeah, I think by the end of it, they kind of got fed up on it. And I mean, at the same time, too, by that time, the game had been out for like 4 years, right? Like, I had already retired by Legacy of the Void. So maybe they're kind of like getting towards their.
Yeah, they just need to patch
careers,
more, like, Dota frequency. Like, at least once per quarter. At least. Like, maybe every 2 months.
That's a pretty good pace. Yeah. I think, so we're still on, like I said, Stormgate doesn't release as much information, but I know in the Kickstarter for ZeroSpace, they talked about doing, I think, 2 game-changing like patches or additives every year. So quarterly, or like so every fiscal year, I think they want to say they're doing 2 big patches every year, which would be nice. And then obviously small patching in between too, right? So
cool. And that's kind of like how Dota does it. They have like micro balancing every month or so, and then every 6 months they just turn the game upside down, like new mechanics, new map.
Yeah, I do like that. The only thing that sucks is that like if you're on the receiving end of the turn, you're like, oh man, I'm kind of just in a shit space for 6 months. But at least there's an end, like light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and at least in the new ZeroSpace, it's not like your faction is nerfed to the ground totally, because you could still pick mercenary group or sub faction, whatever they call it, and then a hero.
Right.
And maybe you get banned sometimes, so you're practiced in more than one skill set. True. Because in Dota, hero gets nerfed, I don't really care. Like, oh, I play 10 heroes.
I play 6 or like, that's it.
Just don't.
Yeah. So I found that the paragraph that they have is, so it says, Versus is set to be our primary competitive mode. Our goal is to release 2 major game transforming updates annually with periodic balance tweaks as needed. That's pretty nice to see. Right from the outset, players can expect comprehensive ranking systems, leaderboards, the hardest of the hardcore, the RTS veterans. We're ensure to fully customize the hotkeys, adapting game menus. Okay, sweet. So that's pretty sweet to hear already, right? Being that they want to have 2 major game transforming updates. That's awesome, right? Because then that kind of goes back to what you're saying. Flip the game on its head, as well as doing balance tweaks as needed in between. That gives reassurance that they'll be monitoring the game and hoping that they'll catch things early on before they get too out of hand.
Cool. That's very exciting to hear. I'm really looking forward to what that game looks like. It's crazy to see how far it already looks in alpha. Because if you saw like StarCraft 2 alpha photos, it was just StarCraft 2 or StarCraft Brood War with skins over it. Like it looked rough. And this game looks so fluid. It
looks polished.
The movement looks as responsive as like League of Legends, but with higher frame rate, which in an RTS I thought was kind of cool to see. We haven't really seen games like that.
Yeah, it's exciting to see. Like I know you and I both, we've been excited for this game. We both already pledged our 165.
Yep.
I forget the tier name of
I
that,
did the
but
same tier as
we
you.
both, yeah, we both locked in for. They said December is when they're doing the first round of alpha keys, so I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that, and I will not be putting that down until probably I pass away and die in 35, 40 years. I just excited for it. Like, I can't wait to see it come out. I have not been one of the lucky chosen few to play the Stormgate Alpha, but since I couldn't get in there, I was like, I'm going to double down and make sure I can support ZeroSpace. And I think it's cool that they're doing that behind a donation kind of wall, because then you can see the actual dedicated people that are, they're not just getting it by luck. They're like, hey, I'm going to pay for this key, and they're going to grind that game out because they paid $165 to, one, support the developers in the game that they're excited for, and two, be able to actually test the game out and give back feedback and get in there early. So I'm looking forward to being able to grind that game out with you when it comes out. I know once it comes out, me and you are going to be in custom games on Discord playing it. Unfortunately, can't talk about it because it's going to be super early alpha, but just know Derek and I are going to be in there deep, very deep.
ZeroSpace.
ZeroSpace. I'm just excited, man. Like, this is cool. I love the fact that we have 2 RTS games that are coming out that we're super excited for. And StarCraft now has been getting like some love. They have that patch coming out that's going to change a lot of stuff. They have Gamers 8 that just happened. That was a huge influx of money into the space. It's just nice to see that there's still some love for that game that's going on like 15 years old or this stuff, 13 years old, right? That it's getting up there. And it's cool to see that as that maybe starts to get transitioned out, we have other games coming in to take its place. And I'm excited. It's going to be weird to see what happens with StarCraft 2 after Stormgate and ZeroSpace come out. Like, do you think StarCraft gets played at all? Like, I don't know if that has a place in the current game when you have 2 brand new titles coming out in the same genre that are, hopefully going to do it better.
I don't know what it's going to look like. StarCraft is, of course, a titan. It's the greatest RTS that's ever come out to this point.
Yep.
It doesn't get any support from its developer. However, it has been acquired, or I think they're approved for acquisition, Microsoft Blizzard acquisition, or Activision acquisition.
Yeah.
So we may see different behavior. But currently the game is neglected by the developer, but still kept on support very well by the community and organizations.
Right.
It's just a fantastic game. So for these other games to come in, it's not going to be a walk in the park, I don't think, because StarCraft is just a fantastic game. They're going to have to surpass expectations and basically be better than StarCraft, because if it's not better than StarCraft, StarCraft will live on probably.
And I think it kind of goes to show too, because when ZeroSpace and they finally officially announced it, that was completely unknown. Like, they weren't putting teasers out there. They weren't doing anything. Like, they had some pretty big people on their board of like helping the game with advisors, you'd say, but there's no word of them before they came out, and they came out with like they came out swinging. Yeah, their Kickstarter crushed their goals, and that's strictly because they're such a deep fan base of the RTS game. When they seen this game come out, they're like, damn, I want to see this get funded. So I know everybody it was like a militia that's coming to help. They just jumped on board to help support however they could. And I think ZeroSpace now, they're significantly more motivated to keep putting in the effort because they've seen the initial efforts, fruits of their labor, and it's only going to get better from here. And that just shows where the RTS space, resides, because they're still supporting StarCraft after all these years without developer support. And there's still big tournaments coming up and still pro players kind of popping up and this whole community based around it. It's going to be really great to see that transition into a developer backed game, a fresh game, get some new eyes on it. Because I don't think we're getting very many new players into StarCraft. So the people keeping it alive are the old heads, the people that are dedicated from like release time till now. And having them transition into new RTS games and then picking up the new younger generations is going to be a really cool landscape to be a part of.
Definitely. So speaking of balance and all these games, there was a community released StarCraft set of patch notes, which they came from Alex007. I believe he's affiliated with ESL and the community balance team. I'm not part of that team, so I don't really know the details, but these are things I'm pretty sure that could end up in the game. I read through them. I think you read through them.
Yeah.
Do you have any initial thoughts on the approach they're taking? It's a lot of micro adjustments and a couple unit reworks, but they hit all 3 races this time.
Right.
Any significant
So for
thoughts?
myself, I haven't been an active StarCraft player in a very long time, so I can't really comment on the minute changes of things because I don't know what's broken, what's strong. I don't know if these balances are going to be good overall because, like, if you look at something like the Cyclone, the cost is reduced from 150 to 150, 100 to 125, 50. Like, is that a huge deal? I actually don't know. Like, there's a lot of things that are getting used. Like the Widow Mine, I always thought was a really strong unit to begin with, and it's kind of weird to see them buffing it. Yeah, they're definitely buffing it. Um, so like lurkers, when I last time I played got absolutely destroyed by lurkers. So to see them get buffed, it's like, oh, okay, I don't know if it's good, if it's bad. It's hard for me because I'm kind of disconnected. Going through it though, it seems like it's a very Terran Zerg favored patch. Like going through the stuff that Protoss is getting, there's not a whole lot happening. Like Oracle Stasis Ward increase, that's a little bit. I mean, Sentry's Guardian Shield increase times a little bit. Immortal Barrier blocking its initial shot, that's a cool little thing. But other than that, the entire patch for Protoss is basically about just reworking the mothership. And like I said, I haven't played, so I don't know if the mothership is viable, if they're trying to make it viable, or what that looks like for Protoss. So I mean, you got to kind of take the reins on that. Like, how do you think it's getting played out?
So for me, I think I agree with what you said. There's a lot of focus on Terran and Zerg more so than Protoss.
Yeah.
Protoss got some significant adjustments on the mothership.
Is that big though? Like, do you see, is the mothership getting played right now? Will it get played after this? Will that answer and fix some of the problems that Protoss is having, or how does that look for you?
It is a bad unit, but it will be a little bit better since it doesn't have energy anymore. So against Terran,
Right.
you can't just EMP it. It's a
Hmm.
reliable source of recall, a reliable source of time warp. You no longer have to worry about it getting EMP'd and just being useless. So maybe
Does
we
it
see
still
it in
stealth
that
your
matchup.
units?
There's still what?
Like, does it still make your unit stealth if it's under it?
There's an ability that cloaks it for, I
Oh,
think, 20 seconds.
okay. That's too bad. That used to be the best part of
Yeah.
mothership.
So I think the mothership will be better because it builds like 30 seconds faster or something, and it's cheaper.
Oh, that's good.
It's faster in a lot of ways, and it can't get impede, so it will be better. It's not really played currently. It's kind of a terrible unit in the current state of the game, but maybe we see it shift some metas in the Terran Protoss matchup.
In the current state, do you find yourself building a fleet beacon pretty often in the late game, or is this going to be like a tech path you have to go down specifically for the mothership?
It's built in PvZ just about every game. I don't know. I've seen it in Terran. It comes into PvT every once in a while.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna make a difference in PvZ. I think the mothership's still bad in PvZ. But maybe the recall will make up for it. Maybe recalling in PvZ will make it more useful. Like, say you hit a base with carriers, then recall to the other side of the map. That could be pretty strong,
Right.
actually. But people were doing that anyways, but in very rare. It was still very rare. But now they can
Right.
do it more. Perhaps we'll see some evolution in that meta.
Okay.
And shield upgrades and air upgrades are cheaper now. So perhaps maybe air is a little better now.
Yeah. Maybe start seeing air toss across the board
That
now.
would be cool. I feel like the upgrades are kind of non-impactful on any Protoss air units besides the carrier.
Hmm.
So maybe it opens up more carrier strats. The other units aren't really helped very much. Um, but yeah, the biggest change I saw that immediately stood out to me was +2 banelings no longer one-shot workers.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's a huge deal because if you've played ZVP even since early Legacy of the Void, +2 banelings one-shot workers. So there's run-bys, banelings like 8 to every base at the same time, baneling drops, a whole
It just
mineral
ruin
line's
your working
cleared.
line.
But
Yeah.
in these situations, you're gonna come out with more workers alive. Like even if it's like
That's nice.
12 more workers than usual, it's gonna be a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because right now they just get obliterated if you're looking away. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest nerf to Zerg that I saw. Hydras were buffed, which they're There was a meme about like some intern there who loves Hydras. I don't know where it's came from or if it was real, but sounds like they're back because this Hydra upgrade, they keep making the Hydra hit faster and faster. I mean, 2-hatch Hydra players are gonna have a field day with this patch.
Yeah.
I feel like the strategy should be left as is, not made better, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think all it's going to come down to is whether those patch, because you said they're not an official like released notes to Blizzard
not
or from
official.
Blizzard, right? There's kind of
Yeah.
like a proposed from the community, right? So hopefully Blizzard listens, because I think that's important. If the community is asking for things, you should kind of follow along with it, which would be great. But I guess we'll wait and see if that actually comes to fruition. With that being said, though, we'll start to wrap up this podcast a little bit. What's your final thoughts on the actual patch notes as a whole? Do you think it's going to be good for the game? Are you excited for it? Are you going to play more or what?
I'm happy to see that they're patching the game. Maybe it causes me to play more. I want to see more of Protoss core army units adjusted a little bit. Like we're seeing Hydras adjusted as well as Cyclone. I would like to see a Gateway or Robo unit get a little bit more impact.
Yeah.
The Mortal change is cool, but
Very minute, though,
Yeah.
because I feel like if a Marine hits it first, it's going to block 4 damage and then just get shredded by Marauders. So
yeah, Protoss has been very lacking in pretty much the entire history of Legacy of the Void. So I would like to see some more focus on making their core army maybe a little better while nerfing some of their quote unquote hero units.
that's yeah, it's gonna be cool to see. I want to obviously see StarCraft still stay relevant, and I think by patching the game and making it more interesting, you'll be able to do that. We'll see what happens in the coming months with the new games coming out. But other than that, I think there's a lot of stuff coming down the RTS train, and we're going to be here every week to cover it. I think our official schedule is going to be a release on every Wednesday. We're going to try
Wednesdays, okay.
to do this bad boy.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of it. I think we'll film Mondays, because then we'll be right there after all the action, because once tournaments start coming out, they'll be done Sunday evening. Give us a chance to collect our thoughts over the weekend, get caught up on stuff, and then record Monday, release Wednesday, be relevant, and keep everybody in the loop. And we have a lot of stuff planned for RTS in general across the board, just from content creation and the organization. But it's good. It's good timing for being an RTS fan. I think this is something we've been waiting for a very long time, and now we've got 2 heavy hitters coming out that keep surprising us with the quality and quantity of stuff they're putting out, and it's gonna be a great time for everybody.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And right now we're talking like a lot of meta on like what the future is going to be like for RTS. Right now our discussions are very theoretical.
100%.
Theoretical. But
yeah, theoretical. Yeah.
In the future, yeah, this will probably be more interviews, more coverage of the actual like esports scene.
Absolutely.
So it's a little bit more filler right now. But in the future,
yeah,
I don't know how we're gonna pack all the information into one episode with 2 games.
It's gonna get hard.
Yeah.
I know it's gonna be hard. 2, potentially 3, and then maybe this becomes like the new resurrection of like, because every company decided to release a battle royale after Fortnite did well. Maybe every company starts doing RTS games now, and we have 17 games we got to cover every week, and you and I have to quit our full-time jobs to focus on this podcast. But if that's what it takes, we'll do it. Whatever, we're here for it.
Yep.
But with that being said, we're excited for the future. We'll be back again next week with another episode of the Supply Cap podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed what we had to say. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave them in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, retweet, talk about it. And like I said, we'll be back again. We're going to try and be the most reputable news source for RTS games in the future. With that being said, Derek, do you have anything you want to say before we close it out?
Good stuff. Looking forward to the future of RTS.
Absolutely. Me too. Great way to put it out. And everybody take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next one. All right? Take care.